It was the night of April 25th, 1973. One of those crisp spring evenings where the air carried a certain stillness. The kind of quiet that made you feel like something was about to happen. My name is Henry McDaniel, and what I'm about to tell you will sound unbelievable. It still does to me. But I swear on my life, every word is true. I had just finished my dinner and settled into my armchair by the window, listening to the distant hum of crickets outside. My wife had gone to bed early and the kids were asleep. It was peaceful, the kind of peace you only get in a small town like Enfield, Illinois. Little did I know that peace was about to be shattered. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard a peculiar scratching sound at my front door. It wasn't like anything I'd heard before, not the soft pawing of a stray dog or the tapping of tree branches. This was deliberate, almost like claws raking against wood. At first I thought it might be a raccoon or maybe a possum, so I grabbed my flashlight and my .22 pistol. You can't be too careful, especially when you're out here by yourself at night. When I opened the door, the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, and I froze. There it was, standing on my porch, not 10 feet away from me, was a creature straight out of a nightmare. The first thing I noticed were its eyes, massive, glowing red orbs that seemed to pierce right through me. They weren't like the eyes of any animal I'd ever seen. They radiated an unnatural light, as if something otherworldly burned within them. The creature itself was about 4 or 5 feet tall, covered in a mottled grayish skin that looked tough and leathery. But the most bizarre thing, it had 3 legs, 3. It stood there, balancing on those 3 limbs, its arms short but ending in sharp, clawed hands. I couldn't even process what I was looking at. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it some kind of mutated animal? A prank? But those eyes, they weren't human, and they weren't animal. They were something else entirely. The creature let out a low hiss, a sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was guttural, almost serpentine, and I could feel the vibrations in my chest. That's when it took a step toward me. My instincts kicked in. Without thinking, I raised my pistol and fired 2 shots. The gunshots echoed through the night, but the creature barely flinched. I know I hit it. I'm a good shot, and it was too close to miss. But it didn't bleed, didn't cry out. Instead, it turned its head slightly, as if annoyed, and then it did something I'll never forget. With an almost effortless motion, it leapt into the air, covering an impossible distance. I'm talking 50, maybe 75 feet in a single bound. It landed in the field across the street, its glowing eyes still locked on me. Then with another leap, it disappeared into the darkness. I slammed the door shut and bolted it, my hands trembling. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I stood there for what felt like hours, gripping the pistol, my ears straining for any sound that might indicate it had returned. But there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the night, as if the world had returned to normal. But I knew better. Normal had left the building. The next morning I stepped outside to examine the scene. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and I wasn't about to rest until I understood what I'd seen. That's when I found the tracks. They were like nothing I'd ever seen before, 3-toed, deeply imprinted in the ground, and spaced far apart, as if whatever made them was moving with incredible speed and power. I measured one of the strides. It was over 10 feet. No animal around here could do that. Word spread quickly. It's not every day you find yourself face to face with a monster. By afternoon, reporters and curious neighbors were showing up at my house. I told them what I saw, but I could tell some of them didn't believe me. They gave me that look, the one that says, "Are you sure you're not making this up?" But I didn't care. I knew what I saw, and the tracks were there to prove it. Over the next few days, others came forward with their own stories. 2 young boys claimed they'd seen the creature earlier that evening, describing it as a weird, slimy monster. They said it chased them briefly before disappearing into the woods. Their accounts matched mine almost perfectly. Even the local police started taking the reports seriously, though they didn't know what to make of it. That's when the town's atmosphere changed. Enfield was no longer just a quiet little place where nothing ever happened. People were locking their doors at night, keeping their kids inside after dark. Hunters and thrill-seekers started combing the woods, armed to the teeth and hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature. But no one else saw it, at least not up close. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching, waiting. Every night, I'd sit by the window with my pistol on the table, listening for any sound that might indicate its return. Sometimes I'd think I heard something, a faint rustling, a distant hiss. But when I'd shine my flashlight, there was nothing there. Skeptics began to surface, of course. Some people said it was a kangaroo, of all things. A kangaroo. Now I've seen pictures of kangaroos, and let me tell you, what I saw that night was no kangaroo. Others suggested it was some kind of hoax, that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing or made it up for attention. But I didn't care what they thought. I knew the truth, and so did the others who'd seen it. Weeks turned into months, and the excitement eventually died down. The creature was never captured, never seen again, at least not in Enfield. But the memory of that night stayed with me, clear as day. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring out into the fields, wondering where it had gone, what it was. Was it some kind of undiscovered animal, a visitor from another world, or something else entirely, something beyond our understanding? I'll probably never know. But one thing's for sure. There's more to this world than we can see, more than we can explain. And sometimes, if you're unlucky like me, it comes scratching at your door in the dead of night. To this day, I've kept the tracks, the memories, and the pistol close by. Not because I'm afraid it will come back, but because deep down, a part of me hopes it does. Not for revenge, not to shoot it or kill it, but to look into those glowing red eyes one last time and maybe, just maybe, find an answer to the mystery that haunts me still. I didn't mean to stumble upon it. It was one of those restless nights, the kind where sleep evades you and your mind seeks solace in distraction. I had been tinkering with an old shortwave radio, a relic of my grandfather's. Its dials and knobs felt like a link to a simpler time, a gateway to forgotten frequencies. The static was a constant companion as I turned the tuning dial, seeking something, anything, to break the monotony. That's when I heard it, a haunting melody, faint but clear, breaking through the white noise. It was repetitive, almost hypnotic. I froze, the hair on my arms standing on end. The melody stopped abruptly, and then a voice, mechanical, cold, and devoid of emotion, began to speak. 7, 4, 9, 2, 1. I stared at the radio, my hand hovering over the dial. The voice continued, reciting numbers in an unrelenting cadence. It wasn't just the voice that unnerved me. It was the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be hearing this, like I had trespassed into a space meant for someone else. Curiosity outweighed caution. I scribbled the numbers onto a notepad, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this some sort of code? A prank? My pulse quickened as the voice ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Then the melody played again, and the transmission ended. Over the next few nights, I became obsessed. Every evening I'd sit by the radio, scanning frequencies in search of the mysterious broadcast. Each time, it was the same pattern. The melody, the numbers, the silence. I began to notice subtle variations, a change in tone, an occasional word interspersed among the numbers. Anna, Nikolai, Ivan, Tatiana, Roman. The names sent a chill down my spine. They felt personal, intimate, like they were meant for someone specific. But who and why? One night as I listened, something changed. The voice faltered, stuttering on a number before stopping altogether. Static filled the air, loud and grating, but beneath it I could hear something else, a faint whisper, almost imperceptible. I leaned closer, pressing the radio speaker to my ear. "We're watching." I jerked back, my heart pounding. The whisper was gone, replaced by the familiar melody. My hands trembled as I turned off the radio. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the static. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I dreamt of shadows, faceless figures standing in the corners of my room, their presence oppressive and suffocating. I woke up drenched in sweat, my mind racing with images of those whispers and numbers. I tried to stop listening. I really did. But the pull of the unknown was too strong. I needed answers. I began researching numbers stations, delving into forums and archives filled with tales of similar broadcasts. The deeper I went, the darker the stories became. People spoke of spies, covert operations, and shadowy organizations. Some claimed the broadcasts were meant for operatives in the field. Others believed they were a form of psychological warfare. One theory caught my attention: the idea that these stations weren't just sending messages, but also receiving them. That somewhere, someone was listening too. One night, as I tuned in, I noticed something new. The numbers were different, but they seemed familiar. I stared at the notepad where I had been recording them for weeks. My blood ran cold as I realized the sequence matched my grandfather's old phone number. Then the voice spoke a single word: "Leave." I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. It was the same robotic voice, but now it felt directed at me. I turned off the radio and threw a blanket over it, as if that could shield me from whatever force I had awakened. That night, the shadows returned, more vivid than ever. They whispered in a language I couldn't understand, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of dread. When I woke, I found the radio on, the melody playing softly. I hadn't touched it. I decided to destroy it. I carried the radio to the backyard and smashed it with a hammer, the plastic and wires scattering across the grass. For a moment I felt relief, but when I returned to my room, the notepad was gone. In its place was a single sheet of paper, blank except for a sequence of numbers written in neat, precise handwriting. I haven't listened to the radio since, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it. The melody, faint and distant, as if it's calling to me. And in those moments, I can't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, is listening too. When my daughter was still little, the two of us were curled up on the couch in our front room, watching an animated movie as dusk began to fall over Boise. It had been one of those slow, lazy evenings where the world outside seemed distant and inconsequential. Then my phone vibrated briefly before the screen went dark. The battery had finally given out. As someone who always puts off replacing chargers, I knew the only one we had was somewhere in the kitchen. Leaving my daughter engrossed in the movie, I got up to find it. The charger was on the counter, right where I'd left it that morning, As I crossed the kitchen to plug it in, though, an overwhelming wave of unease swept over me. It wasn't subtle. It was the kind of instinctual, bone-deep warning that freezes you in your tracks. Something was wrong. Turning toward the window above the sink, I saw the back gate wide open. Again, the latch had been faulty for weeks, and I kept forgetting to fix it. But that wasn't what made my breath catch. Sitting cross-legged in the yard, a figure in a hooded sweatshirt and dark sunglasses was staring at the house. Despite the fading light, the glasses obscured their eyes completely, and they didn't move. Not even when I took a step closer to the window to confirm I wasn't imagining things. They just sat there, eerily still, like a mannequin posed for effect. My heart raced as I locked the back door, my hands fumbling with the deadbolt. I grabbed my charger and phone and hurried to the dining room. My daughter called after me, asking why I was acting weird, but I couldn't explain, not yet. Plugging in my phone, I opened my laptop and sent a hurried message to a friend who was online. Someone is sitting in my backyard, staring at the house. My phone is dead. Please call the police if I don't message you back in 5 minutes. I watched the seconds tick by on my laptop clock, praying for the charging icon to disappear and my phone to power back on. My daughter wandered in, asking for a glass of water. I made some excuse about waiting until the movie ended, desperate to keep her from the kitchen windows. Finally, my phone lit up. With shaking hands, I called 911. The dispatcher was calm and professional, asking for my address and a description of the intruder. I stammered out everything I could recall: the hood, the sunglasses, their motionless posture. She urged me to stay on the line and asked if I could peek out a window to confirm if they were still there. Creeping to the edge of the kitchen, I stayed low and tried to glance through the window without being seen. That's when I remembered the dog door. It was in the back door, a gaping vulnerability that I'd neglected to block off since our dog passed the previous year. Panic set in as I realized how easily the figure could. A shadow moved across the glass, and I found myself face to face with the hooded figure. They were standing right outside the window, their head tilted slightly, like they were trying to get a better look at me. I scrambled back, gasping into the phone as the dispatcher's voice urged me to grab my daughter and lock myself in a room. Abandoning stealth, I ran back to the living room, scooped up my daughter, and bolted for the front door. As I fumbled with the lock, I heard it, the slow, deliberate swing of the dog door flapping open. We fled across the street to a neighbor's house. They were in the middle of dinner but didn't hesitate to let us in when they saw my tear-streaked face and trembling daughter. I collapsed into their foyer, barely coherent as I tried to explain what had happened. While they distracted my daughter with a coloring book, I stood at their window, staring at my house and praying for the police to arrive. When the squad car pulled up, 2 officers entered the backyard, their flashlights sweeping the area. Minutes later, they emerged with the intruder in handcuffs. It was a woman, her hood down, but her sunglasses still firmly in place. She seemed unnervingly calm as the officers led her away. One of them stayed behind to give me a brief report. They'd found her sitting on my back step, one arm dangling lazily through the dog door. When questioned, she refused to give her name or explain why she was there. There was no sign of weapons, but her presence alone was enough to unnerve the seasoned officer. That night, I boarded up the dog door. Within a week, I'd put the house on the market. Even though the woman was in custody, I couldn't shake the lingering dread. Every creak, every rustle in the dark felt like a harbinger of something worse. And sometimes, when I'm alone in our new place, I still see those sunglasses in my mind's eye, unblinking and fixed on me from across the yard.